first thing to do when you're animating a new character is to figure out what makes their movements unique. Now, I like to call this their motion language, and it's just a bunch of traits and rules that help you figure out how a character should move in each shot. Now, the great thing about doing this is that it makes the animation process a lot easier because you're not reinventing the wheel each time. And it also helps make your characters a lot more consistent. For the pigeon, we noticed a bunch of little things like the way their toes curl and how their bodies tilt back and forth when they walk. But the biggest thing was that every motion starts with the head. Animators often call this the power center, and it has a really big effect on the character's personality. For instance, nervous people tend to react with their head first, whereas confident people usually start with the hips. Now, you can really show a lot of stuff just by changing which part of the body drives the motion. So most of the time we played up the pigeon-y aspects by putting the power center in the head, but every once in a while we wanted the pigeon to feel really menacing, so just by moving the hips first, suddenly he gets a lot more confident and powerful. The second thing is that because a pigeon's eyes are on opposite sides of his head, he doesn't actually have any depth perception. So that's why they do this little head cock thing, because it creates a bit of parallax and they can tell how far away things are. Now, of course, one side effect is that it also makes the pigeon look a little bit dumb, so we decided to play it up when it's funny, but take it off when he needs to look smarter. And the last big one is that the head never moves smoothly. It jerks from one place to the next and stays almost perfectly still when it's in between moves. There were a lot of other small things, but you get the point. It's all about creating some limitations that the animator can work within. Otherwise, it's too open-ended and things get inconsistent. So once we figured out this motion language from the things that pigeons actually do, we took a look at our toolkit and noticed that we had a lot of physical stuff in there, but nothing that helped convey emotion and personality. So we actually filled some of those gaps with dog characteristics. Whenever we hit a wall and didn't know how the character should act, we'd figure out how a dog would do it, and that was a lot easier to imagine. And then, of course, you put the pigeon stuff back on top of that, and no one will ever make the connection, at least not consciously. Well, thanks for tuning in. Remember that you can subscribe to these podcasts, and I actually just added a section to the mailing list so you can get an email update every time a new podcast is released. And I would also like to thank FXPhD for sponsoring this episode. I finally got a chance over the weekend to look at some of the classes that the other professors are working on this term, and I really enjoyed the Python for Compositors and also John Flower's Indie Post-Production class. So be sure to check out FXPhD, and I will see you next week.